Now today I want to talk to you about does God exist? And this is a question that has been on the lips and on the minds of human beings since the creation of planet Earth and the creation of the human race. And today I want to offer 7 good reasons why Almighty God does indeed exist. You see, the great detectives like Columbo, Sherlock Holmes, the way that they solve their cases, fake detectives of course, is by accumulating evidence. They would never just turn around and say, here's one piece of evidence, therefore you did it. What they do, they accumulate evidences, and once they've accumulated enough evidences, then using reason and logic, they deduce who committed the crime. Today what we're going to be looking at is an accumulative case as to the crime of who committed the creation of the universe. And I believe that we will discover through a cumulative case that there is a God behind the scenes who has created everything that we see and know around us today. I also believe that there are 3 types of people amongst us. There are the believers. There are those who already believe in God. And they've come here today to receive more evidences to bolster up and strengthen the faith that they already have. The second type of person that's here today is the searcher. They're not sure whether God exists or not, but they've come here today because they want to discover if there really is any evidence for the existence of Almighty God. And the third person, unfortunately, that's here today is the skeptic. And they've come here today with a hard heart, with closed ears and blind eyes. And they've come here today as a challenge to me and the challenge to the rest of us. Convince me and convert me if you can. Well, unfortunately, you're lost. Nothing can be done for you. Even if I were to show you right now the resurrected Jesus standing to the right of me, it still would not convince you. You would say, I've taken some hallucinogenic drug. Some holographic image is being projected. No matter what evidence a skeptic is shown, they will always remain a skeptic because their hearts are hardened and their mind is darkened. But if you're here today and you're a believer, or if you're here today and you're a searcher, I have good news for you. You will leave here full and satisfied and convinced that Almighty God exists and He loves you. If you've come here today as a skeptic, I'm sorry, but you're going to leave as empty as you came. Nothing can be done for you. Now, the arguments I'm going to be sharing with you today, the good reasons, there are 7 of them, are very complicated arguments from the world of philosophy. And science, in and of itself, can neither prove God's existence, and science cannot disprove God's existence, because all science does is look at the world around us and try and figure out how it works. And from that, you can never work out whether there's an almighty God behind the scenes. However, the discipline of philosophy, the discipline of using rational and logical thoughts and arguments through the discipline of philosophy, you certainly can come to some quite astonishing conclusions. And today we're going to have such an astonishing conclusion. Now, the arguments I'm going to present today, or the reasons, I have simplified them. Now, that does not mean to say that they are simple arguments. They are not. They are very complicated and complex arguments that go over the top of most of our heads, including my own. However, I have simplified them so that hopefully we can grasp something of what these reasons or arguments are trying to state. And I've also used objects, so we're going to use object lessons to try and comprehend what these 7 arguments or these 7 good reasons point to. Now, without any further ado, we're going to move on to the very first reason, and I've entitled this reason, The Box. Now, here is a box. And inside of the box, you'll discover that there is, bit of audience participation is fine, you'll discover that there is nothing at all. Okay, there's absolutely nothing at all. Now, the fascinating thing about this particular box is that when you close the lid and when you shake it up, you discover that when you open the lid again, you discover nothing. Really? Oh, okay. Let me try something else. Abracadabra. No, I know you're not allowed magic in church normally, but just let me off on this one occasion, okay? Abracadabra. Bunny rabbit. Nothing. Now, why is there still nothing in the box? Because there was nothing in there in the first place. And this is the whole argument. If you have a whole pile of nothing, what does it produce? If you've got we've got a couple of bank people here, Paul and Nadia. Are bank managers keen on people opening up bank accounts with zero money in them? Why? There's no profit, there's no interest, there's no accumulation of funds. If you start with nothing, no matter how much nothing you have, what do you end up with? Nothing. So nothing always produces nothing. Can I have a show of hands for those of you who actually believe this? Nothing always produces nothing. Of course. We all believe that. Why? Because it makes rational and logical sense. If you start with nothing, you end with nothing. And it doesn't matter how much nothing you have. Remember, nothing means the absence of everything. It doesn't even have the potentiality of bringing something about. So if you start with nothing, you always end with nothing. Would you say that the universe is something? Yes. Would you say that you're something? Yes. Some of you would say you're very something, wouldn't you? Would you say that animals and planets are something? Stars, matter, energy, dark matter, space, time. These are all somethings within the system that we call the universe, the one verse, the place where we live. And by universe, I don't mean solar system. I don't mean just our sun and a few planets that spin around it. And by universe, I don't mean galaxy. By universe, I mean the trillions of solar systems that are out there. The trillions and billions of galaxies. All of the stars and the planets and the moons that are out there. All of the space. All of the matter and the energy. All of the time. Everything. If you were to jump into the Starship Enterprise and travel at the speed of, 10 times the speed of light, and you kept on going for 1,000 years, you still would not reach the outer boundary of what we call the universe. The universe is gigantic, and we live on a small planet called Earth, floating around within this universe. And we have such a tremendous universe around us. Now, the eminent physicist, Paul Davies, you may have heard of him, he says this: what caused the universe? Or what caused the Big Bang? What started it all off? One might consider some supernatural force. Or one might prefer to regard the Big Bang as an event without a cause. It seems to me that we don't have much choice. Either something outside the physical world or an event without a cause. What he's saying here is, and he's a physicist, one of the top guys in this field, he says we've really got two choices as to where this whole universe came from. It either came from nothing, a non-cause, or it came from a supernatural being or supernatural entity or force beyond our universe. And this guy is putting his reputation on the line. I mean, he's a brilliant mind. But he says we've got one of two choices, guys. It either came from nothing or it came from a supernatural force. And I don't know about you, but logically speaking, if I follow my logic and I go where the evidence is leading, I do not believe this universe popped into existence uncaused out of nothing. How many of you right now are concerned that an emu has just popped into existence, has just materialized out of nowhere and is currently in your front room right now, chewing on your cushions, knocking over your photo frames, and kicking your television set? How many of you are concerned that this is happening right now? If we were, we would all jump in our cars and go home, right? Now, none of us are concerned because we know that even a simple thing like an emu bird can't just materialize out of nothing. How much more, then, is it impossible for a whole universe, with all of the life, the stars and the planets, to materialize uncaused out of nothing? The universe was created. It was created by something. And so far, this is the first good reason. The universe came into existence from something. Reason number 2, I've called the cup. Here in my hand is a cup, a lovely blue cup. It's one of those special cups, if you put underneath hot water, it changes colour. Pointless bit of information, but here's a cup. And the great thing about a cup is that it can hold water, it can hold drinks, and you can quench your thirst with it. And imagine, I know it's the middle of winter, but imagine right now it's a hot, sunny summer's day. I mean, the fans aren't working in this place, the heaters are on, and we're just sat here and we're sweltering. The tongue is sticking to the roof of our mouth because it's so dry and we're so thirsty. And I come along with a jug of iced cold water, and I pour this iced cold water, and it begins to run over the brim. And I offer one person in this room this cup of iced cold water. And I say, the first person out the front can get it. And I imagine all of you stand up and you're all barging and you're running towards the podium to the front of the church. And you're grasping at this water. And I say, but hang on, there's one condition. You can receive this iced cold cup of water from me only after an infinite amount of time. Now, what does infinite mean? Forever. Never ending. Now, if I were to say to you, you can receive this cup only after an infinite amount of time, would you ever receive this cup from me? No. Why? Because you would never get there. There's no such thing as an infinite amount of anything. There are things called potential infinites. Potentially it can go on forever. However, you can never have an actual infinite. Because an actual infinite suggests that you have got a hold of something that goes on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. You can't have that. Even mathematicians and philosophers will quite ardently argue an actual infinite amount of anything is impossible. And so you could never receive this cup from me after an infinite amount of time. Would everybody agree on that? It's just logic, isn't it? It's just reasonable. Aaron, would you come here, please? Would you now receive this cup from me? Give him a round of applause for participating. Well done, Aaron. Okay, go sit down. Thank you. Now, that should shock you. And you ask me, well, why should that shock me? Well, what's he just done? He's just walked up and taken the cup from me. However, you cannot receive a cup after an infinite amount of time, can you? No. But he's just done it, hasn't he? Which proves, philosophically, mathematically and logically, that before today, there has not been an infinite amount of time. Would you agree with that? Now, prior to today, there could not have been an infinite amount of time, because if there were an infinite amount of time, Aaron could not have come up just then and received the cup from me, because you cannot receive a cup after an infinite amount of time, which means that time had a beginning. Well, maybe you're not convinced. I want to share with you a story about something called the infinite bus, or the infinity bus. Imagine you're a bus driver, and you're driving along, and you have an infinity bus. And your infinity bus has an infinite amount of seats in it. And it's full up. Every single seat within your infinity bus is full. You pull up to the bus stop. There's a queue of 12 people wanting to get on. And you turn around to that queue of 12 people and say, sorry, my infinity bus is full up. Every single seat in my infinity bus is taken. You cannot come on. The passengers, the guys standing outside, they begin to get a little bit irate. They're like, hang on a minute, I thought this was an infinity bus. You should have an infinite amount of seats. We should have room. And you think about it for a while and you say to yourself, well, if I move the front two people off of their seat and move them to the second seat behind, and I ask the people on the second seat to get up and move to the third seat behind, and the third group of people to stand up and move to the fourth seat, then I'll free up 2 extra spaces at the front. And that will just carry on down into infinity. And so you ask 2 of the 12 people to come on and sit down. And they've now got a seat. But the other 10 start complaining. You found 2 seats for them. Surely you can find 10 seats for us. And so you think to yourself, well, hold on. If I move the front 2 back 5 seats, and I move the second row back another 5, and you do this all the way back on into infinity, you free up another 10 seats. And those 10 passengers can now come on. Well, you started off with an infinity bus full. 12 more people wanted to get onto an infinity bus. Well, you moved those 12 seats back and you accommodated 12 extra people. You started off with a full bus. You finished off with a full bus. You've always had an infinity bus, but somehow you've added 12 extra people. It doesn't make mathematical sense, does it? And that's the problem with infinities. Infinities never make sense because they don't really exist. If I were to ask you to count backwards from infinity, and let's say today, it can't be done, but let's say today you finished off on 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. You did it. Round of applause. Well done. Why did you finish off on 0 today? Why didn't you finish off on 0 yesterday? Because an infinite amount of time would have preceded us yesterday as well as today. Why didn't you finish off on 0 last year or 10 years ago? Why not a million years from now? Why didn't you then finish off on 0 then? Once again, actual infinities are nonsense. They don't really exist. And so an infinite amount of time has never really existed or occurred. Time had a beginning. Time began the moment the universe began. That means prior to time, or kind of a poor way of expressing it, before time existed, there was no time. There was no time for anything. There was just eternity. And eternity is timelessness. We measure time by events. And what do I mean by an event? An event is any type of change, any type of movement. So if we look at a clock, for instance, you'll see the second hand ticking 1, 2, 3. And what that's doing, it's moving through time in a forwards direction. Now, unless your clock is really faulty, you never ever see the second hand ticking backwards, do you? And there's a reason for that. It's because time always moves forward. It doesn't move backwards. It doesn't move sideways. Time is in a kind of linear direction. It's always moving forward. And time is, as Lee correctly said, time is measured by events in history. Whether it's your heart beating, whether it's your eyes flickering, whether it's subatomic particles moving, or whether it's the clock ticking away, time is constantly moving forward. And that's why, folks, unfortunately, we get old and grey and wrinkly, because we cannot stop time. No matter what Nivea tell you, no matter what these beauty products tell you, you cannot arrest or stop time. Time will move forwards. One more question and we need to move on. Yep.
Before time began, everything was just paused.
We're going to come to that. Excellent question. We're going to come to that later on. Fantastically. It's nice to know he's thinking logically. Brilliant. Excellent. That's where we're going with this. Okay, so far, rationally and logically speaking, we have concluded 2 things, at least. First of all, something created the universe. We're all in agreement, yes? Yeah. Secondly, that something must be prior to time. Because if that something created the universe, it created time. Because time is part of our universe makeup, space, time, and energy. That's what our universe is. So whatever created our universe is something that exists prior to time, or something that exists eternally, has no beginning, no end. We can logically and rationally prove that and work that out as an ironclad case. The third argument I want to share with you, I've entitled battery. I hold in my hand Hey, no product placement. We're filming this, remember. I'm holding in my hand a battery. Now, a great thing about a battery is it causes things to work. In fact, your whole body is a great battery. It absorbs energy through food and through water and through sunlight. And this energy that we absorb, chemicals interact with it, and it produces energy in our bodies, and it causes us to think and to breathe and to move and to relate to one another and to exist and to live. And our bodies are just like a battery. Now, the great thing about a battery is that it stores energy. It stores power. And whatever you put into a battery, if the battery were 100% efficient, whatever you put into it, you would get from it. Now, unfortunately, there's really nothing in our universe that is 100% efficient. However, a battery is a pretty good illustration. Now, what I want to ask you today is, could you get more energy out of a battery than what you put into it?
No. You can if you have a transformer.
All right, Lee. Okay, can you get more out of a battery than what you put into it? So let's say you put 10 kilojoules of electricity or power into a battery. Could you then get 30 kilojoules out of it? No, of course not, because those extra 20 kilojoules are appearing from where? Nowhere, nothing. We've already argued in the very first reason that you cannot get something from nothing. If this worked at 100% efficiency, the amount of power that you put into it, you would get from it. Therefore, the law of the conservation of energy only tends to work within closed circuits. And we don't really know enough about our universe at the moment to say whether it is a closed circuit or not. But what we can logically and reasonably surmise is that the energy that we have within our universe has come from something of equal or greater power for it to have been produced. So whatever the eternal something is that created our whole universe, the energy that we currently have has either sapped this something that created the universe completely of its power, and now it just exists as this shriveled up, powerless thing that exists in eternity, or the thing or the something that created all of the energy and power in our universe is so awesomely powerful, so mind-bogglingly just that it still exists with enough power in and of itself to create more and more worlds, more and more universes. I went on the internet last night and I typed in, how much energy is there in the universe? And there isn't a single physicist that will answer that. Because they said, well, there's kinetic energy, there's energy within matter, there's energy within dark matter, there's energy within the gravitational force and fields. The amount of energy in our universe is staggeringly big. And number one, that energy didn't come from nothing. Secondly, whatever we've got out of this energy in our universe came from something of equal or far more energy than what we've currently got and what we're currently experiencing within our universe. So far we've reasoned and we can logically prove that something eternal of immense and unimaginable power created the universe. And there's not a physicist, there's not a philosopher, a mathematician, a scientist that I know of in the world today who would argue with those 3 points. Even the most atheistic of scientists would say, yes, the universe popped into existence from something else. And they may coin all these special terms, many worlds hypothesis, that there's universes frothing up, there's a quantum gravitational field that burps from time to time. Whatever they want to call it, it doesn't matter. They would all agree that the universe popped into existence from an enormously powerful source that exists prior to time. Number 4, the fourth good reason why Almighty God must exist, I called pool ball. Here in my hand is a pool ball. Now, even though I'm not a school teacher anymore, I still like to teach kids lessons. So the other day I asked Maddie Scott if he wanted to play pool with me, and I taught him a great lesson in how to play. Well, this is a pool ball, and as you can see, this pool ball is made of matter. Very hard, very strong. Now, when you look at a pool ball or any object made of matter under an electron microscope, what do you see? What would you find? atoms, molecules. And if we could look even closer, we would find quarks and the whole world of quantum physics and quantum mechanics and things like that. Now, what's really special about atoms and molecules, electrons and subatomic particles and all of these things is that they're not stationary. By not stationary, I mean they don't stand still, they move all the time. And so the chair you're sitting on, the body that you're living in at the moment, this podium and even this pool ball that I'm holding up, even though it looks kind of stationary, even though it looks as though it's not moving, if you were to look deep down under the surface of appearances, you would see atoms and molecules and electrons and quarks flying all over the place, moving through space, causing events in time. Now, a good illustration of this is if I took this pool ball and I put all of the pool balls on the pool table over there and I just threw them all around. And you see all of these pool balls just crashing into one another and moving and flying around all over the place. That's the type of thing you would see if you peered into matter. So matter in and of itself is not stationary. It's full of energy. It's full of movement. So the question I want to ask today is, could something material have created our universe? Every now and then you get these books come out, like The Chariots of the Gods. Did aliens create us? Did aliens create the universe? And really what that question is asking is, did something material create the universe? Because an alien, by definition, is an extraterrestrial being that exists in some kind of material body that flies around in some kind of material ship. It's made of something from within our universe. It's made of the chemistry of our universe. But matter, in and of itself, is made up of small molecules and atoms, quarks that are popping in and out of existence, that are whizzing around at tremendous velocities. And every time you see an atom move from one space to another, what has just happened? An event has occurred. An event has occurred in space and also in time. And anything made of matter, you've got all of these billions and trillions of atoms and molecules and electrons flying and darting all over the place, creating trillions of events in space and time. But we've already proven, logically and rationally, that time could not have existed infinitely. We've proven that. Just can't. Otherwise, he could never have received the cup. Therefore, something material could not have created time. Because for it to be material in the first place, it has to have atoms and molecules and electrons and quarks that are buzzing around in time and space. But if time has not always existed, if time came into creation at the origin of our universe, then whatever created our universe prior to its existence existed without time and therefore existed also without atoms and molecules and electrons and quarks. It is an immaterial object. It exists immaterially. And so far we've discovered through these 4 good reasons that number 1, something created the universe. Number 2, that something exists prior to time and is therefore eternal. Something eternal created our universe, and we can logically prove that 100%. Number 3, this eternal something is unimaginably, mind-bogglingly, I can never say that word, powerful. Something eternal, immensely powerful, and something that's immaterial. Something that's not made of matter. Now, the 5th point I want to go on to, I've called Baby Doll. Isn't she cute? Lovely little baby. I can remember when my boys were this small, and I remember them crying and screaming and puking up over me, and lovely little baby. This one isn't real. Okay, this one isn't, it's not, oh, it's all right, it's not real, look. It's a plastic doll, but it's very lifelike, isn't it? And I think, feeling at the back here, it's got a big, hard unit, and if you put some batteries in there, and you squeeze her belly and things like that, she'll cry for you, and she'll go, mama, and things like that. But it's not real. This is a created image of a human baby. The real thing, by the way, is infinitely more complex than this. A real human baby is made up of trillions of cells. Trillions of cells. And all kinds of wonderful things happen. Did you know there's a little machine that when you're in your mummy's tummy in the womb, your eyes are sealed shut. And there's this little machine that comes along, if you like, with a pair of scissors, and it cuts your eyelids so that you can open your eyes. Did you know that? It's absolutely true. There's a little biological machine that comes along and cuts the eyelids open so you can see. There's little biological machines whizzing around inside all the cells, the trillions of cells in your body, reading something called DNA. We're going to come on to that later. And it's reading this information, and it's reading it, and it's encoding it, and it's almost talking to itself, saying, right, how are we going to build this baby? And these little biological machines whiz off and find the proteins that are needed, the nutrients, the vitamins that are needed, the minerals that are needed, and they build a baby until it becomes you and it becomes me. Now, many wackos out there have suggested, well, maybe the universe created itself. Maybe the universe designed itself. Does anybody here see a logical problem with that? It would be like saying that this plastic doll of a baby made itself. Or worse still, that a human baby has no mother or father. A human baby conceived itself, grew itself, and then became itself. Now, surely you would think that these, I can only call them nut jobs that are out there on the internet, who come up with this theory to get around the God problem. The universe created itself. Well, how can you create something when you don't exist in the first place? How could the universe create itself when the universe didn't exist in the first place, so that it had to be created? It doesn't make logical or rational sense. The laws of physics did not create themselves. Gravity did not create gravity. The electromagnetic force did not create the electromagnetic force. Something else created nature. And if nature did not create itself, then something super nature created it. And by nature we mean everything contained within our universe. The universe could not create itself. It didn't sit down one day and think to itself, well, let's design how I'm going to look. The universe never did this. It couldn't do this. That's like asking you, before you existed, did you imagine how you were going to be? No, because you had no mind to imagine. You didn't exist. And so to ask the question, did the universe create itself, is a nonsensical question. It's impossible for nature to create nature. Therefore, something beyond nature created nature. Something super nature or supernatural. So far, through these 5 reasons, we have discovered, number 1, that something created the universe. Number 2, something beyond time created the universe, something eternal. Number 3, something eternal that's enormously powerful created the universe. Number 4, Something eternal that's enormously powerful and immaterial created the universe. And finally, something eternal that's enormously powerful, that's immaterial, that is supernatural, created the universe. And there's not a person on planet Earth today that could argue contrary to this. These are ironclad facts, borne out by science and philosophy. We'll have questions at the end, Lee. Is that okay? Yeah. All right. Reason number 6, I've entitled Book. Here I have a book. It's one of my older books. It's the Scriptures of the Dead Sea Sect. And in this we have some of the Dead Sea Scrolls translated into English for us so we can read what those guys in the Qumran caves, the Essenes and the people of those sects, 2,000 or so years ago, what they were writing down, we've now got in written books for us. And this is quite an old book, but it's a favourite of mine. I like to go through it every now and then to see what Jewish people believed 2,000 years ago, and I get some of my resources from this. However, I could never read this book or understand this book unless it was written in a coherent language. Although I can read Hebrew, I wouldn't say I'm overly fluent in it. I couldn't just pick up a Dead Sea Scroll from 2,000 years ago and say, oh, that's what that means, and like go through it. I'd have to take my time in deciphering each word, and then I'd be able to translate it. But I am fluent in the English language, and so I can pick up this translation and I can read through it, and if this was an instruction manual or if this was like a Haynes manual for my car, I could go through it step by step and fix my car or do whatever the instruction book or instruction manual was kind of commanding me or showing me to do. And that's something very interesting, because you can only read something if it is coherent. You can only understand it if it's information to the human brain. Now, would you all agree with me that every language has an author? Yeah. Language didn't just appear out of nothing, did it? No, because nothing produces nothing. So every language has an author. Every book has an author. And when you pick up a book, you would never pick up a book and read through it and say to yourself, I wonder if the words just miraculously appeared on the page all by themselves, in perfect English, with perfect sentence and paragraph structure, and perfect punctuation. Nobody in this room who's in their right mind would ever pick up any book and say, well, maybe this just appeared randomly by itself. Now, this book is immensely complicated. Complex sentence structure, complex words, complex punctuation. Now, it may not be complex to us, because we're now familiar with this. But if I were to show this book to little Archie, say, and ask him to read it, would he be able to? No, because it takes a mind, a developed mind, to read information and language, to understand it, to decipher it. And if these pieces of language or information are to be acted upon, then it needs a mind to then go away and reason to itself, well, how am I going to act upon these instructions? Now, there is a language far more complicated than any language on planet Earth that man has created. This language is known as DNA. Bill Gates, you may have heard of him. He owns that small company called Microsoft. Bill Gates said this about DNA. He said, DNA is like a computer code. However, it is far more advanced than any computer code that we have been able to develop. DNA is, once again, so mind-bogglingly complex. It has taken researchers years upon years upon years just to decipher it, to unwind it, and to work out what these DNA proteins, the functions that they serve in our body. You need to understand just how complicated DNA is. It doesn't even just read like a normal language where you just go along and read word for word. It is also wound up in a double helix structure. You may have seen images of it. I should have put one up here maybe. But it's also read three-dimensionally as well. Not just two-dimensionally, it has to be read three-dimensionally. And in every single one of the trillions of cells in your body, you have this book of DNA that is made up of 3.1 billion letters. So I can't do the maths on that. I'm not that bright. But if you multiply several trillion by 3.1 billion letters, well, you do the math. That's the amount of language it takes to make you who you are. And a book by itself would do no good, would it? If I left this book on a shelf in my library, would anybody learn from it if it was just stuck up there? If it was an instruction manual, could anybody follow the instructions to build something if it was just left on a shelf? No. Because a book in and of itself is impotent. It's powerless to change anything. What a book needs is an author to create it and then somebody to come along to read it. And once the person has read the book, he or she can then go away and implement the information or the instructions discovered within that book. And that is exactly the same within every single one of the trillions of cells in your body. First of all, somebody had to write the DNA code. It couldn't have appeared from nowhere. Secondly, it needs biological machines inside of your cell to unravel and unwind a double helix, to then move along the DNA strands and to break pieces off. And to put it in kind of modern day terms, they take those pieces away. They photocopy those pieces. They then bring the piece back, connect it back to the double helix structure. They read, this is what these biological machines do. They read the information found in the DNA, and then these little machines trundle off to go and find the nutrients and minerals needed and the proteins to create another cell. How many of you get dandruff? Put your hand in the air. You shouldn't be admitting to that, guys. Right, it's head and shoulders right now. We all get it from time to time. I'm just messing around, okay? But if you have a look in your house, right, me and Sarah, we pull our hair out sometimes because we kind of tidy up, we hoover through, we wipe all the dust off, and we get the house looking pretty spick and span. 24 hours later, there is dirt, there is grime, and worst of all, there's dust. Now, do you know what dust is made of? Your old, dead skin cells. Just falls off of you without you realizing. And so all that dust, you wipe up and it's all grey, that's you. That's your dead skin falling off of you all the time. You should be concerned right now. You should be saying, well, if all of this skin is falling off of me, am I just going to fall away into nothing? Am I just going to turn into a pile of ash? One day, yes, but not right now. And the reason for that is when your dead skin cells fall off, those little biological machines know about it. There's trillions and billions of them inside of you. And the moment a skin cell dies, or any cell in your body, as it's nearing its completion, those little biological machines run up to the 3.1 billion letters and they open the DNA book. They read the instructions as to how to make you. And they discover all these nutrients and minerals that are needed, and they go off and they find them and they bring them together and they mold a new protein and they mold a new cell. And a new cell replaces the old cell that dropped off. When you cut yourself and you bleed and then it clots together, little biological machines are knitting you together so that you're healed. Now, you can believe if you want to that all of that design popped into existence uncaused out of nothing if you choose to. But I would put to you that you are being irrational and greatly illogical. One of the leading atheists of the 20th century, and also into the 21st century, was a guy called Professor Antony Flew. He headed up debates against Christians and believers in God. And he argued with them over and over again how God could not possibly exist. A few years ago, Professor Antony Flew turned around and said, I have been wrong all of these years. For the last 50 years of DNA research that I've studied, I have now come to the conclusion that Almighty God must absolutely exist. He says there is no other logical explanation as to where the most complicated language in the universe came from. It needs an author. Secondly, a book on the shelf does no good. It needs somebody to read it. Where did these biological machines come from to read this information? And secondly, where did they get momentum to move within the human body to go and find exactly what they need to keep you living every day? You've got one of two choices, folks. It either came from nothing or it came from an author. I have no problem working out which option I'm going to choose. So we have discovered that something eternal, that's enormously powerful, that's immaterial, that's supernatural, and immensely intelligent, created the universe. And finally, we come to the seventh good reason why Almighty God absolutely must exist. And I've called this clock. The question I want to ask is, can non-personhood create the universe? So let's say we've got something that's enormously powerful that exists eternally. Let's say we've got something that is immaterial. Does it have to be a person, a mind, a soul? Couldn't non-personhood create the universe? And the answer to that is no. It must be a person. Let me explain why. Lee asked earlier on, if there were no time, what would happen? Nothing. And Lee was absolutely correct. Time would be, there would be no time. Everything would be static, immobile, immovable. If I were to pause time right now, what would happen to you? You'd all freeze like a statue. And sometimes we play those games with our kids, don't we? We say, stop, and they stand there, and if anybody moves, they're out of the game. That is exactly what would happen right now if time were to stop. You'd be immobile, immovable. Not an electron, an atom, or a molecule would move in your body. You would just completely and utterly freeze, even down to the subatomic level. Without time, there is no movement. And prior to the existence of the universe, there was no time. And even if you want to argue the multi-world hypothesis that our universe was just belched out of another universe, that, once again, that can't go on forever, because then you'd have an infinite amount of events, which is once again impossible. So even if you want to argue that, it just proves God's existence more. Because you need an even greater intelligence to create two universes rather than one. And so where there is no time, there is no movement. So let's say we have an eternal something that exists before the universe was created, prior to it. And this something is just static, doesn't move. Let's say my timer up here. This is what existed prior to the creation of the universe. It existed eternally, timelessly, immovably, immobile. Could that bring about the creation of the universe? The answer is no. Why? It doesn't have a will to create. It can't choose to do anything. And we've always said as Christians, haven't we, that God is omnipotent. He's all-powerful. He's omnipresent. He's everywhere at once. He's omniscient. He is all-knowing. The only way that you can be all-knowing is if you do not have a thought process. Because a thought process requires time. And when you think a sum through, you go from one point of the equation all the way through to the logical conclusion, don't you? 5 plus 15 equals 20. You have a thought process. That requires time because every thought is an event in time. And the only way you can be all-knowing is if you don't have a thought process, but you just know everything at once, without having to have any process in time. To be everywhere at once, spanning everything and all of existence, you have to be eternal, timeless. But then once you're in this static, all-knowing, omnipresent, all-powerful state, to create from that type of position, you have to have a will that chooses. I could stand here like a statue for the rest of my life if I wanted to. With my free will, I choose to pick up the pool ball. An event occurs and time begins. You see, the moment God willed the universe into creation, time began. It began for us, and it began for God himself. God is no longer what we would call eternal, because God has stepped into time. And he plans to live in time with us for the rest of what we would term eternity, which isn't quite the correct word. It's better to call it that God would live with us now forever in a potential infinite. That's the better way of saying it. But we use the word eternity incorrectly. But God stepped out of eternity when he willed the universe into creation. The moment he made a decision, the moment God willed something, an event occurred. And once the event occurred, time began. Once time began, God stepped into it. And that's why a day with the Lord is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. God's timescale may not be our timescale, but he now has one. And God will live with us in the new heavens and the new earth for a potential infinite forever and ever and ever in time. And so what we can now deduce, I said it was going to be a cumulative argument, just like Columbo or Sherlock Holmes. One little evidence would never convince anybody, but today I have given you an ironclad case. It's airtight that Almighty God exists. Because when we come to the final screen, we realize that the conclusion of it all is that something timeless and eternal, something immensely powerful, something immaterial, something supernatural, something intelligent, and someone who is a willing agent created both existence and the universe itself, and there is no other option left to us, rationally or logically speaking. You may choose to be illogical or irrational, that's up to you, but usually we lock those sorts of people up. God never said, throw your brain away. He said, love the Lord your God with all your mind. Don't throw away your intellect, use your intellect. God gave it to you. And William Shakespeare said, well, a rose by any other name would still smell as sweet. And somebody might say, well, I don't want to call it God. I want to call it a creator. I want to, just any other name. It doesn't matter. It's the same person. Call him or her or whatever you want. Doesn't matter. Same person at the end of the day. It's the God of the Holy Bible. Well, how can you prove that it's the God of the Bible and not the God of the other religions? Wait around, I'll show you. Not today. There is one God. He loves you insanely. And you may come here today as a skeptic, and you will still leave a skeptic. And everything I've told you today has gone in one ear and out the other, and nothing will change you. Because nobody can. Not even God can change you. Because he's given you freedom to be hard, to be stubborn. And there you will go off into eternity by yourself without him. But for those of you here today who have ears to hear, for those of you who are searchers of truth, for those of you who are already believers, may your faith be strengthened. May you come to know the one who died on the cross to save you, because he wanted to show you just how much he loves you.